You listen
Black
to me when
woman
I'm talking
injured
to
by
you. Do you
police
understand?
7 minutes later. The FBI made a
didn't do
move no
anything.
one
Get your hands
expected.
where I can see 'em.
Hello,
Right now.
everyone.
Move. I said
Before
don't
we
move.
begin today's
Do you
video,
understand me?
I need your help.
I said move.
We've
Let's
noticed
start
that
this
the
trial
channel
now.
is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you
I'm
can
hit.
help us.
They're escalating.
It's quick,
Execute the
free,
contingency plan
and
immediately.
allows us to continue bringing you great
This is a federal
content.
crime scene now.
Your support
We'll
means
take it from here.
everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives exactly 7 minutes after a mistake someone should have never made. It started with a shout sharp, cutting, and loud enough to slice through the quiet stretch of highway like a blade. Pull over! Now! The cruiser skidded in behind her sedan, bathing the asphalt in red and blue. What should have been a simple evening drive instantly turned into a stage of suspicion, judgment, and something far darker. The night was still, the road empty. But the energy? It shifted the second the officer stepped out. His boots hit the pavement with heavy intention. His flashlight snapped on with the aggression of someone already convinced of a story he hadn't even heard yet. He stopped at her window, leaned in so close she could feel the heat of his breath, and said the line that would ignite everything that followed. People like you always got trouble in the trunk. No context, no explanation, just assumption wrapped in authority. Inside the car, the woman didn't flinch. She blinked once, slow, calm, controlled like someone who'd been here before. Too many times before. Her hands stayed perfectly still on the wheel. Her heartbeat steady. Her voice soft but unwavering. Is there a problem, officer? He scoffed. To me? No. To you? Probably. He tapped her door with his flashlight, not to check anything, but to send a message. A message she understood all too well. You don't belong here. The air felt heavier now, thick with unspoken accusation. The sky above seemed to dim a shade, as if bracing for what was about to unfold. Somewhere behind them, a passing car slowed, sensing the tension, sensing the imbalance. The officer looked over her ID without really looking, held it between two fingers like it carried a scent he didn't like. He leaned in again. You nervous? You're acting nervous. She wasn't, but he needed her to be. Her mind drifted just for a second to the last time an officer said those words. Different state, different highway, same energy. She was 19 then, scared and alone. Tonight, she wasn't alone. Not really. She carried power no one here recognized yet. But still, the insult hit. The disrespect simmered. And the moment she lowered her window a bit more, the officer stepped back and barked to his partner. Have her step out. People like this always hide something. The phrase landed with a thud inside her chest, not because it was new, but because of how familiar it was. A second officer approached from the passenger side, resting a hand on his holster like he was preparing for something that didn't yet exist. Inside the sedan, she took a breath, not fear preparation. In the reflection of her side mirror, she caught a glimpse of herself, calm eyes, steady jaw, and a presence that felt anchored to the pavement. She wasn't dressed like anyone important plain blouse, braided hair, minimal jewelry. A woman the world would overlook without thinking twice. But this wasn't oversight. This was profiling dressed as procedure. The first officer slapped the side of her car again. Out. Now. Before she moved, before she even touched the seatbelt, she spoke one sentence, level and measured. Officer, I haven't violated any... Get out of the vehicle, he snapped, cutting her off. The force of his voice echoed across the empty road. A couple walking their dog across the field halted. Someone in a pickup slowed, watching. She unbuckled. She opened the door. She stepped onto the pavement with her dignity intact. But the moment her foot touched the ground, the officer leaned to his partner and muttered not quietly enough. This is why I hate night stops with these people. The words hit harder than the command. They always did. Before he could continue, before the situation spiraled any further, the narrator's voice would normally fade in, but tonight, it stays close, low, intimate. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. She straightened her posture, her eyes sharpened. Her silence held the weight of someone who had weathered storms like this more times than any person should. And though the officers didn't know it yet, this stop, this insult, this moment would cost them far more than they could imagine. Because in exactly 7 minutes, the road behind them would fill with black SUVs, federal jackets, and a truth they tried to bury, bursting straight into the light. The second her foot touched the pavement, the night changed. The air felt colder. The lights felt harsher, and the officers, both of them, stood a little too close, as if proximity itself could manufacture guilt. She straightened slowly, one hand on the roof of her car, breathing through the sting in her knee from the officer's shove. Even the way she stood carried a quiet authority, though none of them recognized it. To them, she was just another inconvenience, another stereotype to be handled. "Turn around," the first officer barked. "For what?" she asked calmly. "For my safety," he snapped. The irony almost made her laugh. He moved behind her, fingers tapping irritably on the taser clipped to his belt. The partner, shorter, younger, trying too hard, circled in front of her like prey, was supposed to look away first. "You traveling alone?" he asked. She didn't answer. Silence to her was a shield sharper than any protest. The younger officer leaned closer, his shadow cutting across her face. "You know, people who avoid questions usually have something to hide." She met his eyes not with fear, but with a look that made him blink, unsure for the first time. Behind them, a car slowed on the opposite lane, the driver rolling down the window, phone held at an angle that said, "I'm watching." The officers noticed. They always notice. But they hate when the world notices them back. The first officer stepped forward again, crowding her space. "You were swerving. You been drinking?" "No." "Medication?" "No." "Then why'd you pull over so slowly?" "I pulled over safely," she said. His jaw tightened. "Everything you're doing looks suspicious." Suspicious. That word had followed her for years, shadowing her like a second skin. At 19, suspicious for driving her aunt's car. At 23, suspicious for entering her own apartment building. At 27, suspicious for wearing business casual in a space not meant for people like her. Quote, tonight, the word felt almost predictable. She inhaled slowly, letting the night settle into her bones. Her eyes didn't flinch, didn't shake. She stood there like someone choosing stillness, not someone forced into it. The younger officer motioned to her sedan. "Open your trunk." She didn't move. The first officer stepped closer. That wasn't a request. But before they could take a step further, a shout cut across the road. "Hey, I'm live streaming. She didn't do anything." Quote. Both officers whipped their heads toward the voice, a teenager in a hoodie standing near the ditch. Phone raised, red recording light glowing like a warning flare. "You need to step back," the older officer yelled. The teen didn't. He planted his feet in the grass. Camera steadier now. "She's standing still, man. She's not resisting," he shouted. More cars slowed, more eyes, more witnesses. And now the officers felt it, the shift, the fragility of their control, the discomfort of a narrative slipping out of their hands. The younger officer muttered, "This is getting messy." The older one replied, "Then handle her before it gets worse." He reached for her arm. But the second his fingers brushed her sleeve, something in her posture changed. Subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. A shift from cooperative civilian to something else. Something silent but powerful. She lifted her chin just slightly, enough to force him to look her in the eye. "Officer," she said, tone glass, smooth, "do not touch me again without stating probable cause." The younger one scoffed. "Probable cause? Lady, you're not a lawyer." She didn't blink. "I'm something worse." The older officer's hand hovered, uncertain now. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, one short pulse. She knew the pattern. She knew the signal. Protocol 9 had been acknowledged. Inside a federal command center miles away, her name had already triggered an internal alert. The system she helped build quietly, discreetly, was already moving. And though she didn't pull out the phone yet, though she didn't reveal anything, the look in her eyes changed. From endurance to calculation. The teen recording stepped closer, voice trembling but brave. "Ma'am, don't worry. We all see what's happening. I got everything on camera." She didn't look at him, but her voice carried gratitude. "Use your words, not just your camera," she said softly. "Tell them what you saw." Quote. He hesitated. Courage isn't loud by default. Then he spoke louder than he ever had in his life. "She didn't do anything. You shoved her. She was just standing there." Drivers honked in support. A woman leaned out her window shouting, "We're watching, don't touch her!" And the officers, sensing the crowd, sensing the shift, tried to regain control the only way they knew. Volume. "Everyone back up. Keep your distance. This is a lawful stop." Quote. But their voices only fed the tension, not diffused it. She stood unmoving, unshaken, almost anchored to the asphalt. And beneath all that calm, she felt it. The approaching hum of engines. the faint vibration of tires on distant concrete, the quiet prelude of the 7-minute storm she knew was coming. The officers had no idea. But she did, because power, when it's real, doesn't shout. It waits, and hers was already on the way. The shouting didn't calm the scene. It twisted it. It sharpened it. The teen kept recording. Drivers slowed their cars. A couple stepped out of their SUV, eyes wide, unsure whether to help or stay back. The night felt like a stretched wire, pulled too tight, begging to snap. And the officers felt it too. Control slipping, eyes watching, truth documenting itself without their permission. The younger officer stepped closer, jaw clenched. "Ma'am, open the trunk. Now." She didn't move, didn't blink. "There is no probable cause," she repeated, voice steady as a metronome. No lawful reason for a search. The older officer exhaled slowly, anger mixing with something uglier. "You want to lecture me?" he said. "You think just because you talk calm, you're innocent." Then he made the mistake that would define the next 7 minutes. He grabbed her wrist, hard. Gasps erupted around them. The teen yelled, "Yo!" She wasn't resisting. A woman screamed from her car, "Let her go. She's not doing anything." But the officer didn't let go. He pushed. A shove disguised as procedure. Her feet slid on the loose gravel. Her knee buckled. Her body hit the pavement with a sound that punched the air out of the bystanders. She sucked in a sharp breath as pain shot up her leg, white-hot, immediate. The older officer barked, "Stop resisting!" She wasn't resisting, the teen yelled back, voice cracking with fury. "Man, I got that on video." The younger officer panicked. "Dude, calm down, too many people watching." But panic makes bad decisions worse. He reached for his gun. At first, she didn't see it. She was focused on breathing through the pain, through the humiliation, through the familiar sting in her knee. The asphalt felt like it held old memories, moments she'd worked her entire life to stop from repeating. Then she heard it. The metallic click. Cold. Sharp. Final. The older officer stepped back, hand raised. The younger officer aimed downward, not at her, but at the ground beside her. "This ends now," he muttered. A deafening crack split the night. The bullet struck asphalt inches from her hip. Fragments of gravel exploded upward. One shard, or maybe two, sliced into her lower leg. She gasped. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. The teen screamed, "He shot! He shot at her!" People rushed closer, phones up, headlights illuminating the scene like a chaotic stage. Blood began to pool on the asphalt beneath her shin, thin at first, then darker, stronger. The warmth spreading through her pant leg was unmistakable, but she didn't cry out, didn't fold, didn't give them the reaction they wanted. She lifted her head slow, deliberate, meeting the younger officer's wide, shaking eyes. "You discharged your weapon," she said softly. "For what?" He stuttered. She moved. "No, she didn't," the teen shouted. "We all saw. We all saw. I." The couple from the SUV ran closer now, shouting, "Get away from her! Call EMS. Don't touch her again." The older officer's voice strained, cracking under the weight of too many witnesses. "Stay back. This is police business." But the road didn't listen. Dozens of eyes now watched every move. Phones hovered in the air like a constellation of judgment. The hum of traffic built pressure behind the scene. She pushed herself up a little, wincing as pain ripped down her leg. Blood trickled down her calf into the cracks of the pavement. Still, she stayed composed. Her silence didn't just unsettle the officers. It terrified them, because silence meant control, and control meant power, and power, real power, was something they were losing by the second. The younger officer stepped back, breathing too quickly now. "We need backup." "No," the older officer snapped, gripping his radio too hard. "We get control first, then we handle her." Could too. But it was too late for control. Witnesses were yelling, cars were stopping in both lanes. Phones filmed from every angle, and she, bleeding, injured, on the pavement, looked calmer than both men holding weapons. One of the bystanders shouted toward her, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Her hand slid slowly toward her pocket, not fast enough to trigger panic, but intentional enough for both officers to tense. But she didn't reach for anything dangerous. She reached for truth. Her fingers closed around her phone, and her voice, steady, low, unshaken, cut the chaos like a quiet blade. "Protocol 9, initiate." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Somewhere behind her, the teen whispered, What did she just say?" The older officer's brows pulled tight. "The hell does that mean?" Her phone vibrated twice, A confirmation. A fuse lit, and in the space of a breath, the night shifted. Not because she moved, not because she fought, but because of what was coming, because now there was blood on the ground. A weapon discharged, witnesses everywhere, and a woman they'd underestimated activating a system they didn't even know existed. 7 minutes. That's all it would take. 7 minutes from this shot to the moment their authority would evaporate, and the officers had no idea that the real storm had just been triggered. The gunshot didn't just echo, it rippled. Across the road, across the field, across every phone camera now pointed at the trembling officers. For a split second, the world held its breath. She didn't. She braced her hands against the pavement, pushing up just enough to sit. Pain radiated through her leg, but her voice when it came was so calm it didn't belong to a bleeding woman on the ground. "Do not touch me," she said. "Not one more time." The older officer froze mid-step, not because he respected her command, but because the crowd did. A woman from the SUV stormed forward, phone in hand. "She's injured. You shot at the ground and it hit her. Don't you dare put your hands on her again." Her husband moved beside her, wide-shouldered, unafraid. "Back up," he warned the officers. "If you touch her again, you're doing it in front of 50 witnesses." 50 wasn't an exaggeration anymore. Cars flanked both lanes. People stood on their doors, leaning out windows, calling relatives on FaceTime, streaming the unfolding disaster. Headlights bathed the scene in harsh, white light, turning the empty road into a stage no one had volunteered to be part of. The teen in the hoodie stepped closer, breathing hard, voice shaking but louder now. "I saw the whole thing. She never resisted. He shoved her, and then he shot the ground right next to her." The younger officer snapped, "Back up, kid," quote. But the teen didn't move. Instead, he lifted his phone higher and shouted, "Everybody say what you saw." And they did. Voices erupted around them like a storm breaking. "She didn't resist. She was standing still. You shoved her first. You discharged a weapon without cause. Someone call internal affairs. Get an ambulance. She's bleeding out here." The officers weren't prepared. Not for this. Not for a crowd turning from passive observers into active witnesses. The older officer reached for his radio, voice cracking. "Dispatch request immediate." But he didn't finish the sentence. A woman from a minivan stepped into the beam of headlights, her voice clear and unwavering. "No, you don't get to call this in your way. Not after what you just did." He stared at her, face reddening. "You're interfering with—" "I'm preventing you from rewriting the story," she shot back. The younger officer paced now, jittery. "Man, this is bad. This is really bad." He glanced at the woman on the ground, almost as if seeing her for the first time. Not just a target, not just a traffic stop, but a human being bleeding because of his fear and his assumptions. The teen walked even closer, phone steady like a broadcast anchor. "I'm live with 1,000 viewers," he announced, "and they're all watching you." 1,000. Already, the officers' faces drained of color. People shouted from cars, "Turn your body cams on," quote. "They were on, right? You didn't deactivate them, did you? What are you hiding?" The older officer barked, "Step back. Everyone stay away from her." But the crowd did the opposite. They stepped closer, forming a loose semicircle around her, shielding her from the officers like a human barrier. She exhaled slowly. Not relief, recognition. This was the moment she'd seen in cities, in hearings, in courtrooms. The moment when strangers decide silence is complicity. A moment when the public stops being bystanders and becomes witnesses. One woman knelt beside her, careful not to touch her. "Ma'am, can you hear me? We're here. You're safe with us." She nodded once. Even that small movement sent pain twisting through her leg. The younger officer tried to push forward, but the SUV husband stepped directly into his path. "You shot near an unarmed woman who wasn't resisting," he said. "Try touching her again." It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. The officer's hand twitched, not toward his gun, but toward the retreat. The older officer, seeing the shift, tried to salvage control. "Everyone calm down. She's injured because she—" "No, she isn't!" a chorus shouted back. He swallowed, hard. The woman on the pavement lifted her chin, eyes scanning the circle of strangers who'd become her shield. She spoke softly, but to everyone, not just the officers. "Thank you for speaking up." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The woman beside her tightened her grip on her phone. "They're not taking you anywhere without medical help, not without accountability." The teen added, voice stronger now, "And not without the truth. We got angles they can't erase." Someone in the back yelled, "Already uploaded. It's online." Uploaded. Circulating. Permanent. The older officer's radio crackled, but he didn't answer. Couldn't. Because this wasn't theirs to control anymore. The truth wasn't in their hands. It was in the crowds, in the cameras, in the live feeds, in the evidence multiplying every second, and that evidence, that roar, that undeniable communal witness, was exactly what the system behind Protocol 9 needed. She closed her eyes for half a second, breathing through the pain, the noise, the tension. 7 minutes. That was the window she'd been told. 7 minutes for the alert to travel. 7 minutes for the machinery to move. 7 minutes for the federal presence to arrive. And judging by the faint hum she heard far behind the crowd, the rumble of engines still distant but unmistakably coordinated, their time was almost up, because the witnesses had awakened, and the storm she'd called was drawing near. The crowd's voices collided in the night air, sharp, overlapping, furious. But inside her mind, everything went quiet. Not peaceful, not numb, just quiet. Pain pulsed through her leg, rhythmic and hot, but the silence inside her was heavier than the injury. She'd been here before, not this exact stretch of highway, not this exact set of faces, but this feeling, this imbalance, this assumption, this moment where dignity and danger sit so close it's impossible to tell them apart. The younger officer paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair, sweat glistening on his temples. "We need to cuff her," he muttered. "She's becoming a threat." A threat. That word struck something deep, something carved into the scar tissue of a past she never asked for. The older officer gestured toward her with a shaky hand. "She's resisting orders. She's escalating the situation." The SUV husband stepped forward. "She's bleeding. The only ones escalating anything are you." The crowd murmured agreement, but she barely heard them. Her gaze drifted downward, to the small pool of blood inching across the pavement. Darkness swallowing darkness. And suddenly, she was 19 again. Flashback Charlotte, North Carolina. Her mother's old burgundy sedan. Her first solo drive home after a church youth event. Blue lights flashing in the rear view. "Step out," the officer said. She complied. "Hands where I can see them." She raised them. "You fit the description." She didn't. 4 more cars arrived. Hands pushed her against the hood. A flashlight shone directly into her eyes. Someone circled her like prey. "She's hiding something." "She's too calm." "Check the trunk." Quote. She remembered her breath fogging in the cold air. She remembered her knees shaking from fear, not guilt. She remembered praying silently that they wouldn't mistake fear for defiance. They found nothing. But no one apologized. They just drove away, leaving her on the side of the road with her dignity scraped raw. That night forged something inside her. Not hatred, not vengeance, but purpose steel-coated and silent. The world had mistaken her for less. She would make sure it never happened again. Back to the present, her eyes opened sharp, focused. The pain in her leg grounded her. This wasn't one 9-year-old her. This wasn't a scared girl leaning on the hood of her mother's car. This was a woman who built systems, laws, and safeguards to protect people from exactly this moment. The younger officer stepped closer again, raising his voice to drown out the witnesses. "Ma'am, if you don't stop—" "Stop what?" a woman shouted. "She's literally sitting on the ground bleeding." Quote. The teen shoved forward. Phone raised. "She was complying until you shoved her." The officer snapped back. "Back up or what?" the SUV husband barked. "You gonna shoot the crowd too?" A few gasps, a few whispers, a few phones zooming in. The older officer's radio crackled again, the dispatcher's voice trying desperately to cut through the chaos. "Unit 4, respond. What is your status? Do you require medical?" The officer abruptly clicked the radio off. The crowd erupted louder than before. Oh, he turned his radio off. "They're hiding this. Call the news. Call internal affairs. Get his badge number." The officer's composure leaked away like water through cracked glass, and she watched it all, their panic, their fear, their unraveling. Then the older officer did the one thing she'd been waiting for. He pointed at her, voice trembling with manufactured authority. "She assaulted me, she resisted, and she ignored lawful commands." Quote. The crowd recoiled at the lie. The teen's voice broke like thunder. "No, she didn't. We have it on camera." The officer jabbed his finger in the boy's direction. "You're interfering with a police investigation." "No," the boy whispered, stepping closer. "I'm protecting someone who didn't deserve this." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Eyes filled not with fear, but with purpose. That was the breaking point. Not the shove, not the shot, not the blood on the pavement. It was that moment when a stranger, a young black boy, chose to stand on the side of truth, not because he had to, but because she reminded him of someone. Maybe his mother, maybe his sister, maybe himself in a few years. Her voice, when it returned, was low and deliberate. "Officer, you drew your weapon, you discharged it, and you injured an unarmed civilian." His face reddened. "You forced me, you were—" "Enough," she said quietly. The word cut deeper than a shout ever could. The crowd leaned in. The night air stilled. She steadied herself on her palms, breath hitching as the pain tightened around her thigh. "You will not rewrite this," she murmured. "Not tonight." The older officer opened his mouth to argue, and that's when the faint rumble behind the crowd grew louder. Engines. Multiple. Heavy. Someone turned, someone gasped. A distant line of headlights curved onto the highway. Black SUVs. Fast. Coordinated. Unmistakable. She exhaled. 7 minutes. Right on time. The headlights grew brighter, sweeping across the asphalt like a warning the night itself was issuing. The rumble deepened, synchronized, steady, unlike any ordinary traffic. The crowd felt it first. They shifted. They murmured. The teen lowered his phone for half a second, whispering, "Yo, that's not police, that's something else." The older officer stiffened, instinct twitching. He'd been in the force long enough to recognize the sound of authority greater than his own. He just didn't want to admit it. "Everyone stay back!" he shouted, voice cracking. "Back up, this is an active—" But no one moved, because no one was looking at him anymore. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the silhouettes forming behind the lights. 4 black SUVs. No sirens. No hesitation. No attempt to appear subtle. Just power. Arriving with purpose. She inhaled slowly, her pulse sinking with the low thunder of engines. Pain still radiated through her leg, but her mind sharpened like someone who'd been waiting for the exact second a storm breaks. The younger officer stepped closer to his partner. "What is this? Backup didn't say anything about—" "That's not our backup," the older officer muttered. He was right, because these vehicles didn't slow cautiously. They rolled in with decisive momentum, pulling to a clean, crisp stop in a tight formation. Doors opened in unison. Black boots, federal jackets, focused faces. A woman in a dark suit stepped forward, first sharp jawline, clipped stride, no-nonsense presence. She scanned the crowd, the scene, the injured woman on the ground. Then she looked at the officers. Her expression didn't change, but something in the air did. It shifted the way tension shifts before lightning strikes. "Federal Civil Rights Bureau," she announced, voice ringing through the night like a gavel. No one moves. The older officer's hand twitched toward his belt. "Ma'am, this is a lawful police." She held up a badge. "Silver. Heavy. Undeniable. Your stop is over." Gasps erupted. Phones lifted higher. The younger officer stammered, "Wait, what are you doing here? We never—" "You triggered a federal alert," she replied. "This location is now under federal review." Quote. The older officer stepped forward, face flushed. "That woman resisted." She— "No, the federal agent cut in." She didn't. She pointed at the circle of bystanders. "She had 50 witnesses. That's more cooperation than you had the entire stop." Phones captured every second. The officers swallowed hard. The agent knelt briefly beside the injured woman, voice softening only for her. "Ma'am, are you conscious?" She nodded, jaw tight, breath controlled. The agent's eyes flicked to the blood seeping through her pant leg. "EMS is 30 seconds out. We already dispatched them." A second agent approached, speaking into a clipped earpiece. "Bodycam seizure team ready. Begin collection." The officers jolted. "Hey!" the older one barked. "You can't just take our—" "Yes, we can," the agent replied. "Federal statute. You discharged a weapon on an unarmed civilian without probable cause." The crowd erupted again. "That's right." Quote. "She told you she wasn't resisting." "You lied." "You shoved her." "You turned your radio off." The teen stepped forward so the agent could hear him clearly. "I got everything on video," he said. "Everything." She looked at him for a long, weighted second. "Good," she said. "Keep recording." He blinked, surprised at the validation. Then he steadied the phone with renewed purpose. Another SUV door closed. Another agent approached with a tablet. "Ma'am," he said to her softly, "we received your Protocol 9 signal. We're here." Her eyes closed briefly. Relief not loud, not dramatic, just real. The older officer snapped. Desperate. "What the hell is Protocol 9? She opened her eyes. Her voice was low-measured, razor-sharp. "It's a federal escalation procedure," she said. created for situations exactly like this when an officer's fear becomes more dangerous than any crime they imagined. Quote, the younger officer backed up a step, both palms sweating, chest rising too fast. You're with them? He asked, voice cracking. No, she replied. I helped build them. The crowd fell silent. What do you mean? The older officer demanded. She looked directly at him. I'm a federal civil rights executive, she said. My oversight division investigates unlawful use of force, racial profiling, and police misconduct. Silence thickened. And you, she added, eyes hardening, just placed yourself under federal investigation. The older officer's mouth opened, but no sound came. Not denial, not justification, nothing. Because now the weight of what he'd done, not the shove, not the shot, but the assumption behind it pressed down like concrete. The lead agent straightened, turning to her team. Secure the scene. Separate the officers. Confiscate weapons, radios, and body cams. Nobody leaves. Federal boots moved in. Clipped orders. Swift motions. Authority the local police couldn't outrun. And she watched it all unfold from the pavement, bleeding, hurting but unbroken. Because this wasn't just a stop anymore. This wasn't fear. This wasn't submission. This was consequence. And for the first time tonight, the officers finally understood it. The turn had begun, and there was no turning back. The night air felt charged now, vibrations from the federal SUVs echoing in the distance. The crowd's murmurs a low roar, the injured woman's chip of pain and endurance like a drumbeat. She rose slowly, gingerly, supporting herself on the car door while agents formed a perimeter. The officers who'd been in command seconds ago now looked hesitant, smaller, shadows under their hats deeper. She straightened. Her blouse was stained, her ankle pulsing, but her posture was unshakable. Officer, she said, addressing the older one first. Her voice clean, crisp, absolute. You discharged a weapon. You pointed it. You injured an unarmed civilian. He glanced at her, mouth parted, eyes wide. Man, you're... She cut him off. No, officer, you're the one under investigation. She let the words land and watched them ricochet. Then she turned slightly to face the crowd of bystanders and agents alike. My name is Aisha Jackson. She let her real name stand in the air, unhesitating. I am the executive director of the Federal Civil Rights Engagement Office. Yes, the one you triggered tonight. Gasps. Phones raised higher. The younger officer paled. You? But you were just a driver, just a motorist. Just a woman, she replied. Until you assumed otherwise. She walked toward the scene of her injury, stepping over the blood specks on the asphalt like someone walking out of the past and into the present. She looked at her leg, then at the officers, then at the sheath of media phones around her. You saw me this way, seated, calm, unassuming. Perhaps you thought the unstated meant powerless. The older officer swallowed audibly. You saw me in plain clothes, carrying no badge, no title. You assumed you didn't have to explain yourself, and you assumed I'd stay silent. But you don't. Her phone buzzed once, someone from the federal team texting. She ignored it. She didn't need the notification. She needed the moment. She raised her voice just a notch. I oversee the investigations into exactly this kind of conduct. You, officer, you conducted a stop that should have been routine and turned it into a spectacle of profiling, force, and misinformation. The older officer took a step back. His partner stepped toward him but stopped when the lead agent raised a hand. The crowd grew silent. The phone cameras steady now. She continued, I am here tonight not to beg for justice but to demand it. Because your fear, your assumptions, your actions on this asphalt are the very things I've spent years working to eradicate. She pointed to the younger officer. You drew your weapon, you claimed resistance, you escalated, and you did all of that because of who I appear to be, because of what you assumed in that moment. Tears of frustration flickered not in her eyes, but on her leg, where blood welled. Witnesses shifted. The officer's authority crumbled. Understand this, she said quietly, but so every mic captured it. Power without justice is oppression, and privilege without accountability is tyranny. The first officer opened his mouth, but the lead agent shut him with a single word. Madam Director? She nodded. The agents advanced. The officer's identification was copied, weapons logged, body cams sealed. She inhaled deeply. Pain surged again, but she let it wash over her. She focused on the field of witnesses instead. Thank you, she said, for seeing me and for refusing to be silent. The teen held his phone up, his voice firm now. She told us. We listened. We recorded. The crowd broke into applause, not loud, celebratory, but powerfully resonant. The older officer's face turned white. He looked around and realized the road was no longer his, the narrative no longer his, and she stood injured but elevated. The position once assumed invisible had become visible, the power once granted by silence and deference now wielded by her. The camera zoomed out. Lights, phones, agents, officers, blood on asphalt. A tableau of transformation. For a moment she closed her eyes, not because of pain, because in those seconds she felt the shift. She felt the weight of all those nights in car seats, on sidewalks, in courtrooms when no one believed her, and now they had to. She opened her eyes, looked straight at the lead agent. "Let's ensure this stop doesn't end as just another statistic." He nodded. Behind her, the crowd started to move back, giving space but maintaining presence. And there, in the quiet hum of federal activity, the scene folded. The officers escorted away, the SUV engines idling, the witnesses dispersing slowly, not with relief, but with purpose. She patted her leg gently. "This wound," she said softly, "is not my damage. It is my badge." Oh. And as the night swallowed the road and the lights receded into blue and red dots, one thing remained clear. The power shift was real. The voice of the invisible became visible, and justice, its shape changed. The night didn't calm after her reveal. It sharpened. Federal agents moved with the precision of a practiced response team, clean, efficient, deliberate. Not frantic like the officers, not defensive, not scrambling. In control, completely. The visual contrast was undeniable. Local police, sweating, pacing, voices cracking. Federal team, crisp uniforms, steady hands, eyes trained on facts, not fear. The lead agent raised her hand. "Begin Sheen lockdown." And instantly the entire highway shifted. Cones appeared from the trunks of the SUVs. Agents rolled out LED beacons. Traffic was diverted with a speed that made the crowd murmur in awe. This wasn't a local police cleanup. This was a federal seizure of jurisdiction. The older officer stumbled forward. "What are you doing? You can't." A second agent stepped in front of him. "Sir, step back. You are currently a subject of a federal investigation." His face blanched. "No, this is a misunderstanding. She resisted." The lead agent turned, eyebrows raised. "Is that your statement?" The officer froze, mouth half open. He knew what the tone meant. Anything he said now became official record. Aisha, still balanced carefully against the car, watched all of it. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't triumphant. She was observant. This was her field, her battlefield. Two agents knelt beside her. "Ma'am, we need to evaluate your injury before EMS arrives." She nodded, letting the agent roll her pant legs slightly. Blood had soaked through the fabric, dark and clotted around the gash. The agent's jaw tightened. "This was from a ricochet," he muttered. "Fired way too close for protocol." Phones caught that line instantly. The crowd gasped. The officers flinched. The younger officer attempted a step forward. I didn't aim at her. I aimed at the ground." The lead agent turned toward him. "An unlawful discharge is an unlawful discharge. You escalated force without threat. I thought she was reaching for something." "For what?" the agent asked coldly. "Herr Compliance." The officer's mouth twitched. He had no answer. The SUV husband crossed his arms. "Tell the truth, officer. You shot because you panicked." "Crate." The teen chimed in, phone steady. "Live stream hit 3,000. People are watching worldwide." The older officer collapsed into silence. Federal agents continued working around them, sealing evidence. Body cams removed, tagged, bagged, weapons cleared, logged, holsters scanned for recent use, radios collected to verify when they were turned off. Every detail neatly tucked into the storm building around the officers. The woman in the minivan pointed her phone at the scene. "They're doing more work in 5 minutes than you did in the entire stop." One of the agents approached Aisha again. "EMS is 30 seconds out, but before you're transported, we need your directive." She nodded slowly. "Proceed with the audit." The lead agent replied instantly, "Yes, Madam Director." The crowd reacted audibly. "Director? She's really federal? She's the boss? Oh my God, no wonder they came so fast." Quote. The teen whispered, starstruck. "She's like the person who makes the rules." Aisha didn't confirm or deny. She didn't need to, because at that exact moment, a black, unmarked sedan glided into the scene. Sleek, quiet, purposeful. The arrival made even the federal agents straighten slightly. A man stepped out mid-50 seconds, tailored coat, eyes sharp behind thin-rimmed glasses. He walked with the kind of authority built from decades of navigating disasters. His badge glinted under the headlights. FBI Senior Field Chief, Civil Rights Division. The older officer nearly stumbled backward. FFBI? You called the FBI? Aisha looked at him, her voice cool as steel. No, you did. He stared at her, confused. I didn't. How, why? When you fired your weapon at an unarmed civilian, she continued, you triggered every federal threshold we put in place to identify abuse of authority. The senior chief stepped beside her. Director Jackson, he greeted, we have the full alert package. We'll handle the officers now. She nodded once. Calm. Commanding. The older officer choked out, How do you people even know she's who she says she is? The FBI chief flicked his wrist. A tablet lit up with her profile, credentialed, verified, federal. He rotated the screen toward them. This woman, he said, is one of the highest-ranking civil rights officials in the region. And you assaulted her. Quote. Silence blasted across the asphalt. We didn't know, the younger officer pleaded. We didn't know who she was. Aisha's gaze sharpened. That's the problem, she said. You treat the unknown as a threat. You treat the quiet as guilt. You treat the unarmed as suspicious. The crowd murmured sad, angry, shaken. The FBI chief nodded toward his team. Detain both officers for questioning. Full misconduct review. Immediate suspension. Quote. Federal hands closed around the officer's wrists. Not aggressively, but firmly. The older officer's voice cracked. Please, you have to understand this was a mistake. No, Aisha said quietly. This was a pattern. EMS finally arrived, lights flashing. The medics rushed toward her, but before they reached her, she added one final line, soft, deliberate, unforgettable. You fired a bullet into my leg. But tonight, I take your badge. The crowd gasped. Phones caught every syllable. The agents didn't blink, and as she was lifted onto the stretcher, her eyes stayed on the officers, not with hatred, but with clarity. The federal storm had arrived. And justice wasn't just coming, it was already here. The stretcher lifted, its frame clicking into place beneath her. The night that had once felt hostile now buzzed with a different kind of electricity, the kind that comes after a storm, when the air is heavy with truth. Lights flashed red and white across her face. Not police lights, EMS lights. Lights meant for care, not control. The medics moved with practiced calm, cleaning the wound on her leg, applying pressure, checking for embedded fragments. But the crowd's silence, that was something new. Not fear, not shock, respect. Federal agents formed a barrier around the ambulance, not to keep people out, but to ensure no local authority tried to reclaim the narrative. Because the narrative no longer belonged to them. Not tonight. The teen approached the stretcher, phone still recording but lowered respectfully. Ma'am, I just want to say, I'm sorry this happened to you. She turned her head toward him, eyes softening despite the pain. You spoke up, she whispered. That changes everything. He swallowed hard, throat tight. No one ever listens when I talk. Tonight, she said gently. The world listened. The boy's eyes glistened. His shoulders straightened. He didn't just record history. He protected it. The crowd murmured encouragements. We're with you. We saw it all. Don't let them twist anything. Aisha nodded once, accepting every word without ego, only purpose. The FBI senior chief stepped forward. Director Jackson, he said, will escort the officers and complete the on-site audit. Your statement will be taken at the medical center. She inhaled, wincing as the medic secured the bandage. Before I go, she said quietly, I need to address them. The chief hesitated. You're injured. You need transport. I need my words, she replied. They deserve that much. He stepped back, and the crowd parted, creating a gentle corridor toward the officers now handcuffed, escorted into the glow of federal headlights. The older officer lifted his head just enough to meet her gaze. He looked smaller than he had minutes ago, not physically, but morally. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Authority lived in the stillness around her. Officer, she began, you didn't know who I was tonight. He blinked, tears forming not of guilt, but of consequence. And yet, she continued, who I am should never matter more than how you treat a human being. Silence rippled outward. You shot at the ground beside me, she said, but it was fear that truly discharged your weapon. He swallowed hard. Shame rippled through him like a cold wind. You acted on assumptions, she said. Assumptions that have injured far too many for far too long. Your uniform is a responsibility, not a shield. The younger officer looked down, jaw trembling. You said I looked suspicious, she said quietly. But suspicion is not a crime. Profiling is. The air thickened with meaning. Then she exhaled slowly, turning her gaze from them to the entire crowd. "And to everyone here, thank you." Her voice rose, not loud, but resonant. Like a bell struck in a cathedral, justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives because people refuse to be silent. Cameras trembled as hands tightened around them. "You didn't just witness tonight," she added. "You protected the truth. You protected me. You protected yourselves." The teen wiped a tear from his cheek but kept recording. The SUV husband put a hand over his heart. The minivan mother nodded fiercely, as if each word restored something she'd lost. Aisha glanced at her bandaged leg, blood still darkening the gauze. "This wound," she said softly, "will heal." Then her eyes lifted with a fire that didn't waver. "But the system that caused it, that's what I'm here to treat." The FBI chief stepped closer. "Director, your transport is ready." She gave him a firm nod, then looked back at the crowd one last time. Her final words rolled across the highway, quiet but unmistakable. "I didn't raise my voice tonight. I raised the standard." The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in the kind of applause that feels like a promise. The stretcher slid into the ambulance. Doors closed. Lights flashed, and as the vehicle pulled away, the road behind it glowed with something brighter than sirens or headlights. Accountability. The night did not forget what happened here. Neither would anyone who witnessed it. And the system she built, the one she bled for, was already moving forward. Stronger, sharper, unstoppable. Never mistake calm for weakness. That's where power lives.